Thanks for joining us for today's CTD webinar, AT and IT Breaking Down Silos to Create Collaboration. As UDL has swept through the education world, it has created a path for new and innovative collaborations. Many of the previous lines between instructional and assistive technologies have been blurred, prompting a need not only for more technology, but for the awareness and additional training. This session will address how such a partnership is beneficial for student learning and professional collaborations. Today, we're pleased to welcome Mary Shannon Marcella, speech-language pathologist, and Rhiannon Gutierrez, learning designer and consultant. As always, we want to hear from you, so if you take a moment to complete our survey after the webinar, you can get your certificate of participation. I'll go ahead and pass it off. Thanks again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. This is Rhiannon. We're so excited to be joining you here today. So we're just going to tell you a little bit about ourselves before we get started. So I serve in the technology department, and I am a digital learning specialist. I'm also an educator and a consultant. I do a lot of work around universal design for learning. And you can follow me on my Twitter handle, which is Rhiannon.
Hi, I'm Mary. I am the AT coordinator for a large urban district. And I started out as a speech-language pathologist. I primarily worked with severe needs students, and I moved into working a little bit more heavily with AAC, and that sort of transitioned into AT. You can follow me on Twitter at MarySLP Boston. So we'd love to know a little bit more about everyone here. We appreciate all the hellos and telling us where you're from. We'd love to know a little bit more about your role in your school system, or if you're outside a school system, what you're doing. If you could just take a minute to participate in the poll, we'd really appreciate it. As we're doing this, I also just want to give the forewarning that we're going to be doing a lot of interacting in this session. We really want to get a discussion going and talk about how other people in other places are working on collaboration and tying AT and IT and sort of carrying out UDL throughout. It looks like right now we have a lot of AT specialists and a couple of administrators, which is always really exciting to see. And some others. If you are an other and you are not shy, could you let us know in the chat box what you do? We'd love to know. OT, school psych, somehow our related services, I think, got left off our list, which seems extra bad since I'm an SLP, but sorry about that.
Yes. I also want to clarify that IT specialists, in the interest of saving space, we actually mean instructional technology specialists, not information technology.
AT para-educator. That sounds like a really cool position I'd love to hear more about.
We have a nice variety here, so we're so excited to learn with you today. All right, great. So let's go ahead and move on. We would absolutely love to have the chat box continue this conversation. So our big guiding question for today is, why should instructional and assistive technology specialists collaborate with one another? And this is really what is guiding our work. Mary and I present a lot at conferences, both assistive technology related and ed tech related, about this topic, about the importance of departments working together and individual specialists working together.
And the nice thing is, every time we present, we're able to really talk to the audience, all the participants, and get ideas from different places, because as much as we're doing what we think is right, we want to hear about more places. It always gives us different ideas, different feedback, and we've learned more presenting than I think we've taught, which in some ways is a really cool experience. So If anyone wants to share, please at any point. I'm going to monitor the chat box from my computer, but the responses are from both of us.
Absolutely. Okay, so we showed a guiding question with you all, and I wanted to talk about what opportunities and challenges exist when people work together. So first of all, in relation to the work that we do, we know that there's a lot of coherence in professional learning tools and systems when we're together. We can also engage in divergent thinking processes. We can co-design and learn from each other. So we don't always come in with the same perspectives, so it's really nice to see where those go in terms of brainstorming new ideas and solutions. And we are absolutely united in closing opportunity and achievement gaps. That's going to be a big theme that we talk about today because we are very much thinking about equity, coherence, and innovation, as Mary will share later. And we really want to encourage our departments and individuals to promote student voice and choice because that is who we are serving ultimately.
So obviously in a school district, any school district, there are challenges when it comes to trying to create new systems or use any type of innovation. And some of those challenges in us working together include that our departments are very much separated. So we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about our departments, but IT and AT are not traditionally together. AT works under the special education department. IT is its own department under the whole technology department for us. Time demands, obviously, you have a full-time job. We both have plenty of responsibilities, so making extra time to take on new projects or collaborate can be hard. There are also some basic design principles that vary from one field to another. You see that when you go to conferences, an AT versus an IT conference is a very different situation, and the way that PD is delivered is typically also different. And then the increase in digital access does not always mean equity, and this is something you'll hear later about in the presentation. But I've been so fortunate to work with Rhiannon because access is always at the top of her mind, and that's not always true for all our tech specialists. You know, a lot of people, tech specialists, administrators, teachers, SLPs, OTs, think that just because a book is digital, that means it's going to be accessible to all our students, and unfortunately that's not the case. So with that increase, there tends to be a little bit of back and forth. And Cindy asked a question about what do we mean by IT, and by IT for this we mean instructional technology, not informational technology.
Yes, and you might also hear me use the terms ed tech, meaning education technology, or instructional technology. In this case, I mean the same thing. So I might shorten them to say ed tech or IT. So that's a great clarifying question. Thank you. All right.
So as I said before, we work in a large urban school district. We have about 125 schools, and I realize that compared to maybe some districts in Florida and Texas and New York, that is not huge. But for us, it is, we're the largest district in our state. We have about 57,000 students. Of those 57,000 students, 20% of our students receive some form of special ed. So they might be in inclusion, they might just be on an IEP in a regular ed classroom, or they could also be sub-separate in our own programs or in outside programs. 46% of our students, so almost half, their first language is not English. That doesn't mean that they're not proficient in English, but it means that their primary language is a different one. And then 29% of our students overall actually have limited English proficiency. So our district does a really nice job. We have a huge ELL department, and we have newcomers academies, and we have bilingual schools as well as bilingual classrooms and sheltered English immersion classrooms. But it's a very diverse district for not being giant. We have a lot of different kinds of learners across our schools.
Yeah, I think we actually have over 100 languages that are spoken in our district alone. And there are maybe at least 20 official ones in terms of our publications. So that's pretty diverse. So we want to tell you a little bit more about what exactly happens in our departments and our roles. So my department is the technology department and houses instructional technology or education technology, networking, infrastructure, device purchasing, and technology support. So that would be like your Genius Bar or help desk. My department specifically provides technology professional learning to teachers. So as a digital learning specialist, I work often to co-design with teachers and other departments different types of technology professional learning, anywhere from functional skills of how to use something to more strategic skills for thinking about the big picture of your goals of using technology in education and learning. We often provide support around implementation so that it can look different. We can talk about going one-to-one devices. We can talk about just in the classroom sense. So we are helping with all of that level. And we also advise other departments on technology tools, systems, and design. So if someone wants to purchase a new tool, they'll ask us, so what do you think about this? And I always tell people, I'm not just going to show you a cool app, even though that's tempting. I always want to ask them, what is the goal? So I often work with people on figuring out what the best tool or system or design would be for their professional learning when they use tech or when they want to actually achieve something with a learning outcome.
So for our assistive technology team, we are part of special education, and even smaller, we're part of a department called Related Services. So that is your OT, PT, speech, vision, adapted physical education, mobility specialists. I think that's all. I don't think I'm missing anyone. And so our team is actually made up of OTs and SLPs. We have a physical therapist that helps us with some access cases, and we have a teacher of the visually impaired who comes in for our vision cases as well. We do try to consult with teachers, but we currently, because of how our department is housed, don't have a teacher on our team, which is definitely something that we want to work on and is something that we're pushing for. In terms of our responsibilities, we handle all of the AT consults, evaluations, trainings, and meetings in the district. So my role as coordinator, I used to do the AAC evals, but right now I have some amazing SLPs working on my team. I have 4 part-time SLPs right now. Their part-time ranges, so we have 2 SLPs that are actually 4 days a week, which is a huge jump for us. When AT started in Boston not that long ago, we had 2 half-time people, a half-time OT and a half-time SLP, and between the 2 of them, in their 2.5 days each, they did all of the evals and consults. There was a lot less trainings, a lot less consultation happening, and less professional development, but it was still an impossible job. So over the years, we're really excited and really proud to say that our team has grown hugely to 4 part-time OTs, 4 part-time SLPs, and like I mentioned, we have a part-time TBI and a part-time PT. Our focus has been on moving towards a consultative model. So we do evaluations, but we prefer to do consultations so that we can also do some implementation and training and trialing within that period instead of being stuck in that 45-day test window. We've also really moved into training more of our SLPs. We run year-long classes on AAC. We also have AT work groups that check out new tools, new apps, go to Rhiannon for help, and all of the above. So we've really grown as a department to be a presence in Boston, and we're really proud of that.
Yes. And I want to reinforce that, she does trainings in her department, and I do trainings in mine. And so there might be a case where someone wants to know about Bookshare, for example. Well, is this individual teacher, is it a whole school training? Because Mary does have a small team, and they are not only doing this type of work, but they're also actually working in schools. They're based in schools. So I have seen, based on the district office, more flexibility in going and doing trainings in multiple places. So sometimes we'll be like, hey, who's the best person for this, and how can we work together because of capacity?
And Sarah just asked a question about the difference between evaluation and consultation. I assume you mean specific to AT. And for us, we like to use a consultation model. And the way we differentiate between the two, even though honestly they're very similar, is an evaluation goes through our internal SPED system, which everyone uses different ones, but a parent consent is signed. It goes through. We have 45 days to complete it, and then we have a meeting no matter what. With our consultation, we do get permission from the parents to complete it, and we work with the school staff, but we don't have that 45 days. So we're able to get in there, and then we might recommend a trial for 6 weeks and then check back in. And then if that didn't work, we could recommend a different trial, or we say it did work. Then once we figure out what tool we actually want to recommend, we'd have the meeting and get it into the IEP instead of being squeezed into that evaluation time window where we have to make that recommendation before the trial and then amend the IEP multiple times. We have another question. So we are not. AT assessment. Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, are you in a state or district where AT assessment is part of the process of evaluation for SPED eligibility? So it is part of the evaluation process. It is not a required part, and you don't need an AT assessment in order to be eligible for special ed. But you do need an IEP or a 504 in order to be evaluated for AT. Do you have forms for consult model in my district? They will just sign an AP, and I haven't ever. So that unfortunately still happens to us, Andy. That is a common thing. We're working really hard with the rest of our special ed department. So we have what we call like chairs of the special ed meetings, who are special ed certified teachers that have changed roles to run the meetings and write the IEPs. And we're working with them to make sure they don't do that, but it still happens quite a bit. What we've done is just present on it and try to explain the differences. I have like a cheat sheet that we could probably edit and share with you after, if you remind me of like the compare and contrast and why it's better to go with the consult model, that I'd be happy to share. Does that answer your questions? I don't want to move on before. Okay. And please feel free to ask questions at any time. We'd much rather you ask when you have them instead of waiting to the end and then forgetting or not knowing. Okay. Thank you. So Rhiannon mentioned a little bit earlier that as a district, we are guided by our core design principles, and these are really important to us moving forward as sort of our mission. So our three guiding principles are equity, coherence, and innovation. And equity is not equal to equality. So we talk about the way we're actually implementing things and the changes we're making for our students. Our coherence is about our big picture and the systems that we're putting in place. And then we also want to be innovating constantly. So a lot of this that we're going to talk about is trying to innovate our professional development to help teachers learn in different ways and making sure that, yes, we're pushing UDL for our students, but if we're pushing UDL for our students, we should also be teaching with UDL methods ourselves to our teachers. So modeling and also accounting for all different kinds of learners.
So I'm just going to share really briefly with you this graphic of the different categories of technology that was shared with me in an assistive technology course. So we can think about different categories of technology like instructional or education technology, which is using tools for learning, and assistive technology, which is what Mary does. These are tools that increase or maintain functional capabilities of a person with a disability. When we think about productivity technology, that's often blurred with education technology because there's a lot of similar software that we use, thinking about word processing programs, for example. And then information technology, which you might associate more with that IT, is really about tools that deliver information to you, such as web browsers. So these are all important, and they all intersect when we are doing any kind of learning.
And just to reiterate, we're talking when we abbreviate to IT, the instructional technology on here.
Yes. And also the final one is medical technology, and this is sort of special to me because I am somebody who benefits from a cochlear implant, and this is something that is very different in the school system. This is something I bring in and is not really part of these evaluations, but it is a core part of my participation in terms of how I interact with technology and learning. So today we're obviously offering you two very distinct but intertwined perspectives on instructional tech and assistive tech. And many of the tools are often having their lines blurred simply because of something like universal design for learning. When we think about some of these tools that are on the screen here, thinking about the use of a Chrome browser, of Google apps such as Google Classroom and Google Docs and Google Drive, these are all things that are part of just general tools. They're supposed to help with productivity, but they're also extremely instrumental to instructional technology and assistive technology. And we can even say that too about the purple puzzle piece for read and write. Now, the company who started it was an 18 company, but this tool has been designed with UDL in mind. And we love this tool as a district, as a Google district, because we are using all these different features, and we want to make sure that our students and our teachers and our staff more broadly have access to these resources. So as I said, UDL connects this work. It is blurring those lines between instructional and assistive technology. And if you're not familiar with the graphic, CAST about a month ago released brand new UDL guidelines. Now the content is still the same, but they have changed their visual representation. And as we can see here, engagement is priority. And I want to reiterate that when we think about those core design principles of equity, coherence, and innovation, UDL is so important in helping make that vision possible. But I think especially when it comes to something like innovation, I see engagement as being really tied to that, because you have to innovate and push and encourage and challenge people to think in new ways. So I want to reiterate that it is so important in any kind of challenge that you take on, especially when we think about PD and working together, we have to have some core beliefs that will bring us forward. So I would say that the very first one would be that we are considering our goals and our audience. So who are you designing for? Now, what happens a lot is I've seen professional learning get recycled. And while I use a lot of similar ideas, I never give the same presentation twice, because my learners are different every single time. So I always consider, what are my goals? Who is my audience? And I try to work with them as much as possible. I think it's important, as individuals and as departments and as groups to work together to model what we want to see. So when we think about universal design for learning, we have to model it not just in our classrooms, but in the way we design professional learning. We also need to document and share. Now, Mary and I have shared that we often go to conferences together, and we are sharing this work. We have shared similar ideas that we're sharing with you today elsewhere, and we're always growing and expanding upon that. We document what we've done. We see how we can grow from that. And a big part of that is that we are getting feedback from people. Like, if we want to grow, we have to get feedback. Our teachers are constantly being evaluated. Our students are constantly being evaluated. As people who work in central office, we should be better too. We should be evaluated so that we can have just better design experiences, better learning experiences for anyone that we serve. So we really try to think about these 4 things all the time and encourage others to do the same.
And I think we're going to have a little bit more of a discussion at the end about it, but getting feedback and documenting has been something that we've really focused on this year, and that we're really looking for ideas if anyone has them, because we know, especially when you come to a PD as a teacher and you're tired, you've been working all day, the last thing you want to do after sitting through 2 more hours of work is fill out feedback forms. So we're really looking to be more innovative and creative in the way that we're gathering that feedback, so that it's not a pain for our participants to be participating in.
Yeah, and one of the tools that I've been experimenting with in my PD in general is to use something called Flipgrid. That's Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a free tool that a lot of people in education technology and assistive tech love. Just imagine posting a prompt, and then students or adults can respond to it in the form of videos. They can show their learning. You can get a little bit more personal with it. So I definitely experimented with that in terms of thinking about new ways to get feedback.
Yeah, and we can talk more about portfolios and some of the other ways that we're trying towards the end, but just to sort of put a bug in your ear about thinking about that piece of it, we're always looking for more ideas.
So we want to share some of our collaborations in PD with one another, and we absolutely want you to chat us any questions that you have about this. We're also going to turn it back on you towards the end, where we ask you what you have done to make PD different for your staff and the people that you serve.
So now is the fun part for us. We get to talk a little bit about the collaborations that we've had and give a little bit of history about our work together. So Rhiannon and I were really lucky to come into our positions at the same time. We were both new to being sort of leaders in what we were doing, and we quickly met and got along, and we're excited to see what we could work on together. So the previous year, before we actually took our roles, there was a pilot in our school system to try a new AT tool, and that is what it was for initially. It was an AT tool to replace a previous AT tool that we had been using. It was a pilot across 6 schools, I believe, and we did 3 schools on the read and write and 3 schools on a different product, got some feedback, and made a decision on which one to go with. So when Rhiannon and I entered the picture, our job was to figure out how to roll it out, what it would look like, and how to make it accessible for all of our teachers and students. So it's funny that I'm talking about this because I feel like Rhiannon really spearheaded this and did an amazing job. But the first big decision we made as our district towards UDL in a big way was, why would we pay all this money and limit the students to only special education? We really wanted to mark this from the very beginning as a UDL tool for all of our students and all of our teachers and staff to use it. And I think that was a key component, not just for building our partnership, but also for really making the tool successful. I think there are a lot of stereotypes and negative thoughts around kids that have to use AT sometimes, or teachers feel like it's a burden because it's one more thing being added for that one student. But when we took a different scope and we really said this is to help all of your students, all of your diverse learners, and yourselves. I mean, a lot of our teachers use some of the features. It really didn't come with the stigmatism of special ed, and we pushed it out. Even though our AT team worked really hard on it as well and did the original pilot, we pushed it out primarily through our tech ed or ed tech department, which again, I feel like gave it a different brand. So I'm going to let Rhiannon talk a little bit about some of the training she did and the amazing landing site, which you can see over here, and I will type into the chat.
Actually, Anna just shared the link to the
great.
site. It is the longer link, but the short link is pasted on our slide deck in the lower right corner. So this is a Google site. It's the classic version of Google Sites, which definitely needs to be updated, and it has a range of resources on there, from videos to interactive Google Docs to some different activities that involve the use of PDFs and whatnot. So my main driver in designing this was that I had a big audience who had different needs. And some people wanted to do a self-paced, show me how to do it, I'm good. Other people really do need you to have that dialogue with them, show them the step-by-step process of how this works. So this was meant to be a central hub repository of various modules that people can work with. And the big thing is, it's not a showcase site. Now just look at this. We are designing for blended learning. We are designing for online learning. So people have to come to these sessions doing hands-on work. And one of the ways that we really make this stick with a lot of people is to use it in the context of Google Classroom along with Google Docs, because they can really see that message of universal design for learning. Okay, I can design this assignment, I can push it out to my students, I can even individualize it and personalize it for each one, and they can use read and write to complete this assignment. It's a really powerful tool in that way, but I think that, again, thinking about that modeling piece and what that would look like for teachers before they take it to their students.
Yeah, and this was not a short process. This is this was a 3-year rollout, essentially. We'd love to say that it happened in 1 year. I think that our goal for the first year was to get our early investors on board, and we definitely had a good amount of them, which was amazing because, you know, one person in school can spread a lot of good cheer, so that was helpful. But our first year goal was really to spread awareness that we had this tool, that it existed. We did get our AT kids up and running quickly on it because it replaced the tool that they were using previously. And in some ways that created a lot of investment because previously when we did AT consultation, we would go into a classroom, work with one student, of course consult with the teacher, and then sort of say, okay, we'll check on you again. We took a totally different approach with this, and it's actually transformed the way that we do a lot of our AT consultation now. We went in and we said, yes, this is for little Johnny or Tommy, but we'd love to show your whole class. And sometimes our students are the very best teachers. So if you get some of the students on board, it was hard for the teacher to say no. And if they're going to do it for one student anyway, they might as well let the whole class do it. That was a really powerful change for us in terms of AT, and it spread, like I said, to a lot of the way we did consultation. And again, falling under that UDL umbrella, a lot of the accommodations we're making for our AT students would benefit other learners just because they don't have IEPs or 504s. It doesn't mean that those multiple means of representation and the different approaches and the increased engagement wouldn't benefit almost all of the students in the class. So it really opened our door to more teachers, more classrooms, and more students, which was really exciting for us.
Yeah, and we also wanted to really encourage teachers to say, you know, your students, they want to go around, they want to click, they want to try things out. It's your job to guide them in making good decisions about what they're going to use that technology for. So we really try to encourage teachers to think that way. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. But I think what Mary shared is really powerful. Like, give that student that chance to share with their peers and to shine. And again, thinking about that student voice and choice.
And we're always looking to take some of that stigma off special ed. You know, we want the kids to feel like they are the same as everyone else. We want them to fit in. So it made a lot of sense for us to take that classroom approach. And I would also just mention that after our first year of creating awareness, we did a second year where a lot of people were using the website. We did some district trainings and some more centralized trainings, put more videos online. And in our third year, we started targeting schools and areas. You know, we'd have a principal that would come to us and say, I'm really on board with this. What can you do? And between Rhiannon's team and my team, we'd work out depending on time and location and things like that. One of us would take it, but the nice thing was that we were all able to do those trainings. So we were able to spread pretty wide. And that's sort of where we're at still, is doing those more targeted trainings for schools that are really invested. Not all our schools are created equal. So some schools have a lot more technology than others. Right. And what we found is some of the schools that have gotten technology, say this year or last, this became a lot more pertinent to them then. So they want trainings now versus when we rolled it out, which is great, as long as they're using it.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move on to our second collaboration with each other, which are ed camps. So ed camps, you might be asking, what are these? If you have been to the ATIA conference that happens in January, February every year, you may have become familiar with Ed Camp Access International. Maybe you've seen them locally. So what an Ed Camp is really about coming together to share ideas and talk about the things that you want to learn about. And I just want to show you really briefly our idea board. So you see in the middle, this is just a brain dump of all the things that people are most interested in learning and talking about. And then we clump them together into what we saw were similar themes. And then on the opposite sides, on the right and left, you can see that there's a schedule that's been built. And this was built on the day of the Ed Camp. Now you see there's two different schedules. So the one on the left is from one that I facilitated, and the one on the right is from Mary. So these are all participant-driven. That's the most important thing to know about an Ed Camp. And it follows what we would call an unconference model. The sessions are always designed on the day of the Ed Camp based on attendees' interests. So attendees can register if they know the time to come. It can last about 4 hours or so, or even 3 hours. And there's usually about, yeah,
depending.
And there are usually about 45 to 1 hour blocks, 45 minutes to 1 hour blocks, where you would have that session as you see on the previous slide. And people will go into the rooms that are available in that chosen space and just talk. Now you notice that on the top picture, people have computers. The bottom picture is more discussion driven. The thing is that the one on the top was definitely modeled more around using technology as a way to actively participate and take notes. So let's say you're somebody who might miss something. We have actually a spreadsheet or a document that has all the different information so people can take live notes as they're in that session. That would help not only them but other people. So that link is shared with them at the beginning. And this is definitely modeled after those UDL principles, particularly representation and action expression. And the thing is, people can go to as many sessions as they want. Now, EdCamp's mantra is to vote with your feet, which for a lot of people is a new concept. Because let's say you want to go to as many sessions as possible because a lot of them interest you, you can do that. You can get up and leave and just walk to the next one or roll to the next one. And if something isn't really interesting, you can get up and go to, and no one will be offended. And for a lot of people, this is kind of strange because in PD, you're told to sit there and to stay. You can't move. You offend somebody. But this is about you driving your own learning. And I think this is so important for teachers. Ultimately, they found these sessions to be practical and useful as a model that they could take back with them to their schools. And I thought that's I like hearing stuff like that. I found that to be really affirming because we want to give people tools that they can take with them. So maybe this wasn't exactly like we're going to give you this AT tool to use, but no, you're giving people that experience of sharing and learning together and seeing what this model looks like and bringing that whole experience back to their schools.
And Cindy made a really good point that EdCamps are not just for AT. And actually, the picture at the bottom and the board that was on the right were from our related services EdCamp. So we did a related services EdCamp for OT, speech, vision, and PT. We didn't have any adaptive phys ed, I don't think. But the 4 disciplines came together, and we had actually a UDL as our focus, but a lot of different things came out of it. So we talked about IEPs, we talked about para-training. We talked about how to build relationships with teachers. It was really interesting, and there was a lot of varied discussion. It was just a completely different model for most of our staff, and like Rhiannon said, the first ed camp I went to, I was like, there's no way I'm voting with my feet. There's no way I'm getting up. This is awkward. People are going to be offended because there is sort of someone that facilitates the discussion, and even though they're not the teacher and they're not meant to be the expert on it, I still felt like, oh, I don't know if I can leave. But once you do it once, it gets a lot easier, and they're a lot of fun, and like Rhiannon said, the discussion is so rich. And even though there's not something set out, like we're not going to learn about the best new app for X, Y, or Z, there usually are a lot of resources. I take a lot of notes in EdCamps, and I find a lot of resources, just like the discussions we might have in this webinar or in a PD. Everyone knows different things, so it's just nice to see different perspectives. And then there are also EdCamps that have nothing to do with special ed. Mm-hmm. That was just a different example. But thank you, Cindy, for bringing that point up, because it is really important. They're not just for AT. They're not just for special ed or IT or anything like that. They can be for anything.
Yeah. They were definitely grown by educators. I can't remember the exact year it started, but if you go to the EdCamp website, you can certainly find more information about the whole movement and the model. If you're interested in hosting one, you can certainly just take that model and run with it. But if you feel like you need a more formal, supportive setup, the EdCamp organization does help you with that.
Does anyone have any other questions about EdCamp? Okay.
Great.
So our third collaboration started sort of by accident. It was an idea that came up last year. We started talking about fidget toys, I think, and it sort of just snowballed because when you put Rhiannon and I in a room together, both our teams end up with a lot more work. You could ask any of them. They tell me never to meet with her, but you know. So it started out with this idea that we have these 3D printers, and they're really cool, and wouldn't it be great if we created some fidget toys and we did a workshop where teachers could come and make them and take them with them. And I thought that was an amazing idea that Rhiannon and one of our special ed directors had. But there's so much more to it. So we started talking, our teams met, and we came up with this idea that instead we create this whole series. So what we did was create a year-long Make and Take PD series. It was practical, so things that you could come in, make, and take to your classroom the next day, whether you were a related service provider, a high school teacher, a separate kindergarten teacher, whatever you were, that you'd be able to take something that you learned and go to your classroom and use it the next day. So we wanted to involve all of our different specialties, everything from our English and pragmatics to visuals to technology and hearing and vision. And we identified a group of people that we thought were really amazing presenters that would be able to spend the first hour of each group sort of giving some history behind why it was important or some information around things you can do in your classroom, and the second hour would be that hands-on component. So this is really taking UDL teaching and modeling to that next level. It's really hard to sit through a 2-hour PD. I have no attention span. I'm the first one to tell you. I love conferences, but I can make it through about 3/4 of a session before I lose my mind. I need a lot of breaks. I need to get up. I'd much rather do things with my hands and actually participate or learn how to do it or try it or use it or whatever it might be. And that was the whole idea behind this. It was to change up the way we're running PD to really get people doing things and to make it useful. Taking someone with you or taking something with you at the end that actually helps you versus sitting there and listening to a lecture about these things that you don't have access to and then going home and thinking, well, should I buy that? Because a lot of teachers spend so much money on materials that we really wanted it to not be something that we sent you home with a theory, but actually something that was practical. So like I said, we had 10 sessions, so one per month from September right through June. We opened it to teachers and related services. We were overfull immediately, and that was a problem for us at first. So we ended up moving some of our related service providers out and offering some of the sessions a second time. And like I said, it was 1 hour of theory and 1 hour of a hands-on component. In the pictures, you just have pictures from our very first one that was in September. We did make and take visual schedules. That one that's in the top right picture is obviously probably for a younger student. It's using Boardmaker pictures. But I also had a lot of teachers that were high school teachers that came and said, my kids don't put the Chromebooks away appropriately. So we did a lot of Google Images, we looked at pictures, and we made schedules that weren't really schedules, but more like step-by-step guides of reminders for the high schoolers to appropriately put Chromebooks back, plug them in, and then shut and lock the Chromebook cart. So it was really applicable to a whole group of people.
So I want to address 2 questions that are coming from the audience from Jason and Linda. So Jason, you've been talking about how you are partnering with your AT folks to design and 3D print devices for students to use that are custom designed for their needs. And you're interested in seeing others doing this kind of collaborative work. Awesome, let's connect. So I would say that one of our PDs that we did, which was last January, and which we showed as part of this series, is focused on fidget tools. So it was actually a truly collaborative effort in that our technology department, where 3D printers are housed, worked together with occupational therapists who knew the rationale behind the kind of things they wanted to print. So this was a conversation where we wanted to have tools that were calming. So thinking about things for self-regulation. And my department was researching some of the different 3D printed objects that can be made or they were already existing. And so they work to print and design those. I can definitely chat you a link to our presentation where we elaborate on that a bit more. And on that note, Linda asked about an general outline for the sessions. You can find that information on the website as well. If you explore the website, a lot of it should be pretty public. There's some things that you might not have visibility of because some things do need to be private. So if that's the case, just reach out to me and I can let you know. And we have various slide decks and resources that we share with people where you can see examples of this work.
And by the end of the year, all the sessions should have some sort of handout or resource that goes with them. They might not all be uploaded at this point because we're still, actually we have a make and take session that is happening right now that some of our colleagues are begrudgingly running because it's usually Rhiannon and I at every session. But so once those are all finished, we can upload more of those resources, and those will be public. What won't be public is actually what we were talking about a little bit ago, is how do we get feedback on this type of PD, because it's not something that anyone in our district has really done. So we want to know that it's effective and enjoyable. So we came up with a different system of gathering feedback than just the typical survey.
Yeah. So we do have a survey, there's a pre and post, asking them more to rate things along different lines. But the big thing, which I try to push for in my own work, is the use of digital portfolios. So it really is helpful to see what people have learned, not just like how they thought the session turned out, but what did you learn from it? What did you take from it? How are you using it? How is it helping a student, or how is it transforming your instruction? Thinking about all those things. So we designed this digital portfolio that gives people a structure which they can input stuff in terms of what did you make, how does this help your student, you know, pretty much that for every single session. And this is part of how we're awarding professional development points for this series, because we say you have to start with 5 sessions, each worth 5 sessions with 2 hours. So you get a total of like 10 PDP, and you can certainly do more. So we want to give teachers an opportunity to grow in their practice and connect with each other, but to also have some artifacts that they've made and they use.
Yeah. And I think Rhiannon mentioned a couple of them, and I talked about the visual PD, but we've also have some on things like hearing loss or students with visual impairments, and tips and tricks and sort of takeaway sheets for those things. Right now, the one that's going today is on pragmatics and how you can teach your students about not just help the students with the pragmatic issues, but being good communication partners and understanding how to interact with students that might have some of those communication difficulties.
Great, and we'd love to continue this conversation, so please feel free to chat. But we are going to try to get to the next couple of collaborations. So another one that we've done is obviously school-based personalized PD. So we'll chunk this into elementary, middle, and high school. I would say it's been, at least in my experience, heavier on the elementary side. And some examples of how we've done that are thinking about using iPads and using Chromebooks. So we know there's a lot of amazing UDL features on both devices. So I collaborated on multiple occasions with some OTs from Mary's team on talking about things on iOS devices related to reading and writing, as well as on Chromebooks. We've also done talked about tools related to self-regulation, executive function, organization, and you can see some screenshots of those documents. If you are interested in seeing those, I can certainly share the links to them in our final presentation in the comments section. But there's so many tools, again, out there that are really blurring the lines. They weren't exactly designed for students with disability, but they make it possible for students with disabilities to participate. So I think that, you know, really highlighting the why of using these tools for teachers can be really powerful.
And again, Rhiannon mentioned this earlier, but really the nice thing about doing these individual school learning opportunities is we go in and we ask the teachers and the administrators what they really need for their students, and that varies greatly from school to school, and then what they have available. So a lot of our PDs and our professional learning on the school-based PD is based on what they have and what they need, and we find those links that tie those two things together. So we're not saying go out and buy 100 Chromebooks, or nope, you all need iPads and things like that. We're using the materials they already have, and that's a lot more powerful, especially to administrators, because we know that money is tight. Yeah. And it's all goal-based. So what are they looking to do with their students, and how can we help them get from one place to the next?
Right. And one of the things that I want to think about is actually, so Sarah actually asked a good question. I'm just going to answer Sarah's question. It's an important one. So how do you keep up with all the new tools? And you know what? There are tools out there constantly. I have to tell you that Twitter and conferences are my best resources. I'm constantly learning from other educators, other professionals. What are you using? Why are you using it? How are you using it? It's impossible for me to know how to use every single one. And again, what's the goal? What are you going to use this for? Because you don't want to just use it for the sake of it being a tech tool, right? You need to think about how it relates to UDL and engagement. And there's this excellent commercial that Microsoft recently released where they're talking about how are you going to use technology, or how is it going to be different in your hands. So I've been bringing this up here and there to talk about that.
And Sarah, I would just say we don't. I mean, we try to know as much as we can. Like Rhiannon said, Twitter is really helpful. Conferences are really helpful. I'm also never afraid to say I have no idea. If a teacher or someone asks me, like, what do you think of this app? If I don't know, I'll just say I don't know, and I'll go home and Google it. And there's definitely things that we miss, but because we both have teams, there's usually one of us that has at least heard of something that we can sort of pool our knowledge for.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking about earlier with Mary said, she was talking about how sometimes it is very helpful to know the tools they have and figure out the best way to use them. One of the things that Microsoft has said is that they have this whole beautiful page on their website about inclusive design, which is a passion of mine, and they talk about how constraints can be liberating. And as somebody who has, you know, this education background, but also a film background where I have budgets I needed to work with, I think that there's a lot of ways that we can use these constraints to think about designing for the edges and to think about how we can really maximize the tools that we have. We just, again, think about divergent thinking, thinking out of the box, and innovating. All right. So we're going to go into our final collaboration.
And this is a current one for us, literally started at the end of last year and is currently probably some of our focus. We're still, all our balls are in the air with the other 4 collaborations still, but this is our newest one, and we're going to talk about it really quickly. You heard me mention earlier that one of the things that we come up against constantly is just because something is digital does not mean it's accessible. And that's where this sort of came from. Rhiannon is incredibly passionate about access, as our team, the AT team is. That's all we do. So we were finding that a lot of our students' texts were just not actually accessible to their needs. And we have Read and Write for Google, and we have some other tools that we use, but not all the texts were cutting it. And it became a really big conversation among the AT and the IT teams, and we wanted to get more voices in. We have a very large library department, or library services, that purchase some of our accessible texts and things like that. And then we also wanted to get in with our English language learners, our academics, and more special educators. And this is a current collaboration. Like I said, we're not sure what our end goal is, but it's really evolved from just talking about text for, you know, regular ed students to also being available in other language for our ELL students, and having books, especially some of our younger grades, that are adapted for our students that are non-readers. So picture-adapted books, audio books, and different things. And we're trying to take all of these departments and figure out how we can sort of lump everything together on one website or one resource so that a teacher would be able to sign on to the resource, find the book that is, you know, text leveled down to their kids level, but is also available as an audio book, is also available as an adapted book, and is available in Mandarin, Spanish, and Portuguese. That's our ultimate goal. We haven't figured out how to get there, but this is a conversation that we're constantly having because we're both very passionate about it and think it's very important.
But it shouldn't stay with us. I mean, we talk about the collaboration between our two departments. We understand accessibility, but we are still learning. We want these other departments to be thinking about that. Because again, if you assign something digitally, I still see people sharing documents, PDFs that are sideways. They're sideways because they've been scanned or upside down. You can use read and write with that. You can use screen readers with that. So it's like, okay, if you're going to be creating things, let's think about ways that we can make born accessible documents. So thinking about what that might mean ultimately for our district in terms of creating those, as well as being very intentional about our selection process and purchase.
So we've done a lot of talking, and we've had a lot in the chat, which is amazing. We're going to ask you guys to be a little bit more active in the chat. I'm sure you're sick of our voices by now. Oh, I lied. Rhiannon had one more slide that she's going to really quickly go through, and then we're going to have a few discussion questions.
Please start posting your questions in there. But we just want to say overall, I think you've heard what the benefits and challenges are. There are, of course, things like the pros are flexibility and willingness to try things, time and commitment, being realistic in this process, and being constantly learning and iterating to improve. Ultimately, we are serving students, so we want to make sure that we're growing in our learning. I heard a great quote from a colleague yesterday where she said, we are a learning organization. That means all of us should be learning, not just the students. So I'd love to hear about what kind of professional development you're currently doing and some of the ways in which you might be modeling UDL in your PD.
I was really excited to hear that Jason's doing some similar things, and we really would love to collaborate more on ideas behind that because it's just really fun to see other people doing different things as well.
Mm-hmm. So Linda asked how we make information available to staff and families. Do we use websites, emails, whatnot? So we really do all of it. We use print media, we use websites, we use Twitter, we will send emails. And the big thing is that it shouldn't always just be coming from the same source. So I often ask schools, how are you sharing information? Have you tried this? What works? Because sometimes the same old ways don't always work, and you have to examine why that might be.
And a lot of our schools are very autonomous, so different schools have different methods. Some of our school principals are very active on things like Twitter and use a lot of that, a lot of social media to sort of share with their parents, where other principals are sending newsletters home every week. So we try to integrate with what's working currently for the school in terms of parents. For our teachers, I would say that having the landing site is really helpful, but a lot of teachers don't know they exist until we sort of send a blast email or find a way to get it out to them. So the landing site's helpful to actually do the learning and have the resources available, but the email helps to generate the awareness that that is out there. And I mentioned this in the chat, but I don't think I said it out loud, and I apologize if I did. Someone mentioned opening the make and take sessions to parents. I think that is something that is so important, and we actually started talking about that a lot in the digital text group because a lot of our parents are not English language, English is their first language, and so we want to make sure that a lot of the resources and text can also be read at home. So we want to make sure we're getting that out to parents as well, and that sort of snowballs into getting parents more involved in general.
Okay, so we're reading a couple of responses from Shannon and Sarah. All right. So it looks like Shannon is trying a lot of different ways in her PD, thinking about flipped learning, thinking about hands-on learning, team-based learning, and developing teacher cohorts. I think that's great. Actually, that was one of the suggestions about our Make and Take PD is how you're going to get this to the hands of teachers so you reach more people. So I love that, the cohorts.
Yeah, we've actually had a lot of success with teacher cohorts in our related service department. So we have different cohorts, and again, it's special ed related because of what the departments are. But we have courses or discussion groups for AAC, for fluency, for stuttering, and different things. And we found that those cohorts are incredibly useful. I think we missed a question up. I just want to scroll up to Sheila.
Yes. So Sheila was talking about nursing, educator professional development, and it needs diverse practitioners. I think that's awesome. I'm not a nurse, but I actually have really good nurse friends, and I think that network. I'm just curious.
So Sheila, we mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
So my department has actually been working with our nursing department
Okay.
on a couple of different issues. Some started as sort of, if you have students with these special needs, how do you address them? And it's really snowballed into not a series for them, but we're talking about vision impaired students and working with them, hearing impaired students, students without communication skills, students, what was the latest one? Sorry, I'm just blanking for a second. All different complex needs. Oh, swallowing difficulties. We have our speech therapist now doing education with them. So it's been really nice. Our nursing manager, or whatever her title is working closely with our special ed director to sort of say, how do we provide more diverse PD to our nurses? And it's been a great experience because I have to say that nurses are some of the best audience and participant in PD. So that's been really exciting for us. Sorry, we're trying to make sure we don't miss anyone, but there's a lot of comments coming in.
Yeah. I'm actually wondering if we should have made this into a Padlet so we can still continue to get these responses.
And I know also that we are out of time, and
yeah.
I don't want, we told Anna we didn't need a time warning, so I don't want to go over, but we're at 5:01. And I would love this discussion to continue. We have
yes.
some other questions that we'd love to talk about. We're always available by email. We're both on Twitter. Rhiannon's a lot more active than I am, but I always check. And you're welcome to message us. And we just want to say thank you so much. This has been such a great experience for us hearing about what you guys are doing. I wish we had a little bit more time, but I want to be respectful to our hosts and thank them as well. So please feel free to continue the discussion, or if you need any resources that we didn't post, shoot us an email, shoot us a Twitter message, anything you need to do. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming.
Thank you. We really appreciate getting to know and learn with you.